And welcome to the meeting of the Common Council on Thursday, June 1, 2023. The clerk has taken the roll. We find all present. Thank you. And will you now please stand and join me in the salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next up is public comments. Do we have any members of the public who wish to come up and make comments tonight? I see mostly staff out there. That being the case, we will move on. And that'll be item D, review changes made in response to updated requests for UWSP Marshfield, presented by Steve Bark. Steve, you're up.
Thank you very much, Council President. I just want to give you a little update on what's happened since our last meeting. It really is entirely due to the UWSP presentation. And again, we got something from them a little bit late, and that's part of because of the transition. I think you probably know many of them. Michelle Bornke and Brian Panzer both retired at the end of 2022, and that left kind of a void in the whole thing. They were the two that we really worked with on the CIP process annually. So when Tony Andrews came on board, I know Dan Kinnick was trying to work with him. I think Tom Turchi tried to work with him as well, but he had a lot of other things on his plate. And so it was only recently that they updated their request. And you did see it last week. I think I sent it to you electronically as a follow-up. It looks very different than what we had put in the packet, but if you boil it down, it's really not that different in total dollar amount. They showed a 5-year CIP from 2023 to 2027, where ours is actually 2024 to 2028, what we're doing here. And as a result, they showed a very large project in 2023, which seemed to throw the whole thing out of whack. Well, that's already been blessed. That's already moving forward as a combination between the county and the city to make that project happen. If you take the rest of it, they're asking for $362,500 over the period, and we had put in there $347,500. So it's a difference of $15,000. Difference in timing, they had some money in there for 2025 that we didn't have anything in that year. Then they had less in other years than we had. So what I've done here, and what you've got in the new upgraded packet that you've got, some of the attachments we sent, really only adjusts a couple of things. Mainly it adjusts the UWSP and kind of balances it off by shifting from year to year on the asphalt mill and overlay work that we do. Again, we're trying to stay to the same amount we can with asphalt mill and overlay. That's an important part of our street project maintenance to keep the roads up. But we had to move it around a little bit to make the numbers work. And then I had moved one project that I'll talk about in a minute that Tom Turchi was not available. He was out of town. He has made it clear to me that he'd prefer to see that not moved, and I'll explain why in a minute. So what you see are the items moved to where for the years from 2024 to 2027, what we end up with is for UWSP, $97,500 in 2024, $90,000 in 2025, $87,500 in both 2026, well, actually, that's wrong. I think I made that mistake. It was, I think, $102,500 in one of those 2 years. So really just shifting to adapt to what they had. We didn't change what they had one bit. We went with what they had. They all seem to be reasonable expectations in terms of maintaining the buildings and grounds. As a result of that, though, we had to account for something that we've been trying not to deal with, and that is, if you look at the plan, it's not even across the 5 years. We stay below the $22.5 million over 5 years that our financial advisor used as our goal. So $4.5 million or less per year. We stayed there, but it's uneven after the first 2 years. So our goal, if I didn't say it 2 weeks ago, was to make the first 2 years right around $4.5 million, and then after that, maybe a little bit off for 26 through 28, but it adds up to the same. Truthfully, to be honest with you, and I think those of you who have been around for a while know this, in 2026 through 2028, the back 3 years of a 5-year plan, we're jockeying for position anyway. Something that's on the docket for 2028 may become way more pressing next year when you're sitting here. We may ask to move that up to 2026 and vice versa. Quite frankly, the East 17th project over by the fairgrounds was put off for many years as a result of other projects jumping ahead of it. So those back 3 years kind of twist around a little bit. So the changes we made to make this work were to account for the $90,000 that they had put in for 2025 that we didn't account for any of that in our original plan. So if you look at what I did, I moved 20,000 from 2025 asphalt paving to 2024, moved it up a year. 50,000 from 2025 asphalt paving out a year to 2026. So that one went back. And then I moved a project that was slated for 2025, and that is to demolish the old airport terminal building, which has been on the docket for quite a while to get that building raised. I think many of you know that MAPS used to be there, the Marshfield Area Pet Shelter, but they've been in their new facility for quite a while. And I know that the airport committee would like to have that building raised, and I believe that the FAA and BOA probably agree with that if it's not going to be used for a valid purpose. So I moved that out 1 year. The premise on that one is that it's an 80-20 split, we're hoping, with the federal and state government, whereby it's roughly estimated to be $100,000. If we were able to get the grant, which we're hoping for to make this work from the other agencies, we'd pay $20,000. They'd pay the other $80,000. So I moved it out to 2026, but in talking with Tom, he requested that that be kept in 2025. So what I did was today I shifted, I'm requesting, you don't see it yet, but I'm requesting moving that $20,000 back from 2026 to 2025 for the airport terminal demolition project, and shifting $20,000 from 2025 out to 2026 for the asphalt mill in place. I want you to know this, though. Asphalt paving and mill in place is a top priority for us, and we've advanced the ball a little bit. We're looking at about $11.4 million over the 5 years. Heaven knows we'd like to do more. If you've been around a while, you know that we're not able to keep up with the total amount of street work that we really need to do on a per mile basis, but it's not taking a hit as a result of any of the changes that are being mentioned here tonight. So otherwise, it's everything the same as we saw back on May 18th, and I would take any questions about the adjustments that I'm proposing for you to consider. Hopefully that made sense. It was mainly asphalt mill in place, adjusting with the UWSP requests.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Not, we'll move on with the agenda. Reviews proposed projects by function, those not covered by the May 18th meeting. First one up is police.
Hello. If you, in your packets, I guess you'll see that police department really only has two major projects on the CIP. Only one would be affecting this year. This isn't a year where we would replace one of the emergency sirens. The lion's share of our CIP is always the vehicles. This year is no different. We've got 3 patrol cars, which is consistent with what we've replaced in the past. We try to replace 3 every year. This keeps us in reliable cars in the warranty and generally under the 100,000 mile mark, where also is important with the warranties and reliability. This year, we would replace an investigative vehicle. We put this off quite a few, and actually in the future, we're changing from replacing an investigative vehicle every year to every other year to try to save a little bit. And these vehicles are generally lower mileage. They don't need to be as reliable. We keep them for about 6 years generally. We start out with a regular civilian vehicle, if you would, off the lot, because the first 2 years of these vehicles, they're with our undercover agents. So we don't want to have a fleet vehicle with that because it becomes pretty obvious it's a cop. So we want to make sure that we get a regular civilian vehicle. An odd one for us this year, though, is our ordnance vehicle. The current ordnance vehicle that we have right now is a 2015 Chevy van. It does have dog cages in the back, but for safety reasons, we want to switch to a different style of vehicle. I did put some pictures in the packet if you had a chance to look at it. The current vehicle, when you put a dog or another vicious animal in it, at one point you're kind of face to face to them because you have to lift the animal into the van and then shut the cage. This newer vehicle would allow the cage to be lowered down so we can put the animal in. There's a hole in the cage for the catch pole so we can shut the door and then have it controlled the entire time. And then they don't have to lift the animal anymore. It'll winch up into the vehicle. The chassis itself, we would buy locally from B&H. And then the box or the cargo portion, there's a company down south that we purchased that from. We predict that the cargo is going to outlive the chassis, so we'd be able to move this on to further vehicles. So we think it's a good plan there. With that, I guess I'll open up to any questions that I could help you with.
Rebecca.
So I'm looking at these pictures that you included. So I'm talking about page 126 and so forth. Is this what you're looking to purchase, or this is the old one?
No, this is similar to what we would be looking to purchase. This is actually on the advertisement of the box portion of it from that company. And then we would buy a pickup. I don't know what brand we would get, but most likely it would be a Ford is what we've got spec'd out for it. So it would look very similar to this.
So it would be a pickup truck, and then you would replace the bed with this
The
thing.
cargo, yep.
Okay. I was concerned because I thought this was like a new vehicle you were looking at. It didn't look very new to me.
I didn't buy one and then come to ask for money for it.
Shame on you.
Right. Yeah, I'll write that down.
Some things kind of slide by, but you know.
Yeah, I can't say that I'm new anymore.
Okay, that's all. That was my only question because I wasn't quite sure what that was.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Tompkins?
Thank you. So we are looking at moving the police station. Is this coming anywhere in our 5-year borrowing?
I think Steve wants to talk about it.
Good question. I may have said this before 2 weeks ago. I thought I did, but perhaps I didn't. There's nothing in this 5-year financial plan that addresses the idea that we might be incurring costs to move to the Buffalo building. And the reason why, and we talked about this with finance staff and the department division heads, we just didn't have a good placeholder dollar amount to put in there. I think what we want you to know is if it turns out this is a good deal for us, if it appears affordable and reasonable for us to be able to renovate and improve that building to make it what the police department needs, we're going to have to look at changing this. Again, a budget is a fixed document. When you adopt it, that's it, except for the budget resolutions that you get faced with from time to time. This is more of a fluid document, and we'll have to scramble and determine what priorities maybe need to be pushed aside or pushed back to make room for it, if that's the decision to move forward with the police project, which hopefully it does turn out to be a good deal for us. But right now, we didn't have a decent number to put in there as a placeholder that would even have made sense, because we really have no idea what the projected cost of this might be.
Okay.
Mr. Werman?
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
So,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Barg, because before that, you had said that we were this document already, we're sort of borrowing at the max of what we can borrow.
And that's true.
So, okay.
That's true. But I mean, realistically, again, I mean, if we were to find out that it would cost, I'll make up a number, $500,000, I'm making that up, to do what we need to do to make the Buffalo building what the police department needs for a first-rate operation, we'd be looking back at everything on this list you're looking at and trying to see what can be cut back, moved back, whatever, if the council sees fit to say that's a top priority. We probably could have just left a big space there and thought, what if? If we'd had any remote number to put at it that we thought was a good guess, I think we'd have done it. It just doesn't exist right now, and it seems pretty early in the process for us to have done that. But believe me, it's a big placeholder in your mind, and ours too.
Mr. Werman?
Hopefully this isn't a silly question, but just looking at the sizes of the animal compartments, have we run into any animal situations in the past that would have required larger compartment sizes like this? Obviously, using the back of a vehicle with dog cages is a little different.
Yeah, this is pretty typical with the size of the cages that we have in the vehicles right now. And for the most time, that's pretty good. We did have a runaway cow one time that we had to, that was a challenge. But yeah, for the most part, this seems to be pretty consistent. And the animal control specialists look at it and they think it's what they need to make it work.
Okay, great. And then second question, I saw a note in here that this was approved in the 2023 CIP. Was that for future allocation of finances for that, or was that for the 2023 year that we just couldn't? Because I saw that there was a sourcing issue. It looked like.
That's a really good question. Actually, we did have it approved last year for that vehicle, but because of supply, we couldn't get it in, so we couldn't order it. So I did call B&H and made sure that the costs and also with the cargo, the cost is consistent. And we were only within about $1,000 from last year with some minor changes. So,
thank you.
Any other questions? Chief, you have anything else?
that's it.
That's it. You're going to be easy to get along with tonight. Thank you.
See?
Thank you
All
very
right.
much. Okay, and next up is streets. Are we going to have somebody else speak? Because this guy's he's a leaker. He's losing it.
No runaway cows here. So, good evening, everybody. As you'll refer to your packet on page 132, we'll start out with our annual seal coat and crack filling. That's our annual crack filling for concrete and asphalt streets, surface treatments, and material costs. As you can see throughout the years, we've increased it to $400,000 in 26, 27, and 28. The other three building projects I have, we kind of put on hold when we did the space needs study with Barrientos, if you recall. Not all of you recall, but we did a space needs study with Barrientos in 19 and 2020. And it was some pretty good talks with the county to move our street division out by the county shop off of Galvin Avenue there. And we were kind of waiting for Ehlers to see how we could fit a $16 million plus generational project into the financial plan, and it didn't fit. So we kind of held off on doing our roof replacement. We're leaking pretty bad already, doing some patching. So you'll see that in 2024, we'll replace the west side of our roof on our main building. And in 2025, we'll replace the east side. And then there's some tuck pointing also in 2020. I can't remember what year that was. 2020 tuck pointing is in 2025 also. Our electrical service is in dire need of an upgrade. Pat's been looking the other way for quite a few years, and we have the electrical service upgrade in the year of 2027. Annually, our 701 account, or our equipment replacement fund, we worked really hard with Jennifer and Jordan. They were pretty busy their first couple of years here with other things, and we finally got to pull them aside and got a good understanding of our 701 account. If you remember last year, it was about $650,000. We had a great couple meetings with them and said, you're probably going to be overspending, so we were a little proactive on that, and we dropped our annual equipment replacement fund to kind of better reflect what we're making up in the M&E fund and machinery rental. So we dropped that down to $400,000 after talking with those guys. So, and then finally, pardon me, sorry. Actually, in 2024, also as part of the building fuel depot upgrade, we'd be replacing the components. We did some updates, some wiring updates 2 years ago. That was in dire need, and it was part of our permit to get that done. So we're going to upgrade our tank monitoring systems, our card readers, our fuel pumps, and system software for the street division. So the fuel depot is used by all departments, police, fire, Marshfield utilities, ourselves, every department in the city. So it's pretty critical for the fuel system to be upgraded. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got one for you. We had a study done when we were talking about going in with the county on a building out on their property out on Hume, I think it was. Wasn't there somewhat of a laundry list of things that needed to be done with the existing street department that was done along with that?
At our very first go at it was with Barrientos, before we kind of had the idea of moving out, was what would it take to just either stay on site and do all these upgrades, new buildings and stuff on site. And then from that report, it wasn't a good choice to stay on site because of the size of it. We'd have to purchase more land to the east, towards the post office there.
I think the term that was applied to it, I think we called it functionally obsolete at that time.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that slowed I think Mr. Fire knows this too. The thing that slowed the county down on it was the $63 million jail suddenly became a $98 million jail. And they're not in any mood to pass any more bond issues at the moment, so.
Right.
But I think they will be in a mood pretty soon. The highway department's getting pretty fed up with the facilities that they've got. So, Mr. Werman, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to verify on the electrical service upgrade. It looks like it says we're not code compliant any longer. I just wanted to make sure that phrasing is accurate and that I would assume that's a high priority, like
It is, yeah.
soon.
It is, yeah.
Looked like we had it out there for 2027, and I was just like, if we're not code compliant, I can imagine that's going to cause some bigger issues.
We're not losing power right now, but every time Pat Hilty comes over, he looks the other way for us, so.
Did that number come from an inspection then?
Pardon me?
Did that number, the 75,000 for that, come from an inspection?
Actually, right now I'm waiting on a quote, an updated quote that was from 2 years ago. So I actually bumped it up this year too. I'm going to get a firmer quote from Merkel to see where we're at. So we're looking at 2027. This might be updated, and maybe by the end of this process, it might be updated. But for next year, it'll be updated to reflect that number correctly.
Thank you.
Ms. Spiros, you're next.
Chris, I just want to thank you again for all the work that you put into it. Most specifically, when we get to your equipment replacement program, the pictures, the details, I appreciate very much. You and I had this conversation a couple years going back now, and you've done a great job. And I hope that you get your predecessor to continue the excellent work that you put forward when you come with this report.
Okay. The one good thing about the M&E account and the harsh winter we had, it's very healthy right now. The bad thing is it really offsets the 101 account. So.
Ms. Tompkins.
Thank you. This is a big picture question. Does the DOT or any organization help give us grants for like sealing streets or anything in your budget? Does anyone ever give grants for any of that stuff?
Not for maintenance, reconstruction, urban STP stuff, local road improvement programs, but as far as maintenance, that's ours.
The shared revenue received from the state from the DOT for our road mileage is actually used for maintenance.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Mr. Weigel.
Going back to the whole code compliance thing, what happens if we're found not to be compliant?
I can't answer that. Pat shuts us off, I think. I'm not sure.
Okay, and do you think it'd be beneficial to shuffle that around and move that sooner rather than later in order to avoid having to find out what that means?
I can check into that.
Okay,
So, yep.
Wonderful, thank you.
And then I'll have some firmer numbers here probably next week. So I might
Wonderful,
have to
thank you.
shift a roof replacement to a electrical upgrade. So.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I somehow or another skipped over stormwater. And Tom, you're going to handle that?
Okay, as you're aware, the city of Marshfield is under TMDL regulations from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources.
Could you explain for the newcomers what TMDL is?
TMDL, and I'm going to have a real nice presentation in a couple of weeks on this whole thing because I have to do an annual report for stormwater. A TMDL is a total maximum daily load of phosphorus. We were just given a new permit cycle from the DNR, and if you remember, we went through and had a stormwater quality management plan completed. With that, we will have to meet the requirements of reducing phosphorus being released by our stormwater by in the next 30 years. So as we look into this, we got a couple projects to get into the next few years to try to get us working towards that. And it's basically in the next permit cycle, we have to achieve about 10% of that reduction to get us towards that completed project. And when I go through the stormwater management annual report, you'll get understanding of how big this is going to be and how long it's going to take to get there. But the two projects we have in here are Brain Park, a new wet detention basin, and Mill Creek Business Park, a dry pond to a wet pond conversion. These projects are slated at $50,000 for engineering and design services and construction, and then $500,000 on each for construction. With the DNR, they do have construction grants that we do apply for on a regular basis, which for stormwater quality improvements like this are a 50-50 cost share. We put these in at the full amount at this time because we don't know if we've received them. The opportunity to apply for these comes around by April 15th of next year. So we are going to be applying for grants for these ponds and hopefully get a 50-50 cost share in helping to construct them. So at this point, that just gets us started into the program with the TMDL reductions. We'll be doing some changes to our street sweeping operations to meet some of that. And there's going to be also some water quality trading that we'll have to do at some point in the future too to help us get there. So any questions?
Mr. O'Reilly?
Thank you. I just have one question on the Mill Creek Business Park. What is the purpose of the wet pond versus the dry pond, and what does it accomplish, just out of curiosity?
So when Mill Creek Business Park was constructed, that was prior to us having a stormwater permit with the city of Marshfield. And when that was constructed, we were only concerned about, at that time, quantity of water. So what we wanted in any type of development is that the runoff meets the pre to post, so the post runoff has the same runoff rate as if it was undeveloped. So when Mill Creek Business Park was constructed, a dry basin was constructed so that the stormwater goes in that basin, gets stored up like you see at the Walnut Basin from the hospital clinic, and then it's released at a controlled rate, so the rate doesn't change. Now, in 2008, when we started with the stormwater permits, we ended up having to hit the quality aspect of the of these stormwater basins. So by making these dry basins to wet basins, like what we did at the Walnut Basin, we created those 3 ponds. We're actually cleaning that stormwater by settling out solids prior to it to leaving, and that is actually making the stormwater cleaner. So that's what we'll be doing on on the Mill Creek Business Park.
Ms. Tompkins?
Thank you. This is just for the new members. Tom, is this right? We're going to be seeing the 500,000 about every year, because isn't it slated to be about $17 million to get us to compliance?
Yep, $17.5 million is what the original plan showed, and it averages out to be about $600,000 a year. We're hoping that we are successful on applications for projects. We're hoping DNR will continue funding projects the way they do. If they don't, it's going to get tight because this is being coming out of tax dollars. It's competing against everything else, where some communities actually use stormwater utilities to address these fundings of these types of projects.
I remember we tried stormwater utility once before. It was not liked very well. Is that a nice way of putting it?
Yeah, that was 2004. Yeah, and then we talked about it here last year a little while ago. So yeah, it's been 20 years since the last time we looked at that.
I don't know if the attitude's changed, but it was very roundly disliked by the business community. Anybody else? Hey, Tom, thanks a lot. Oh, wait a minute, excuse me. Is that Stauber? Warner. I'm sorry, I didn't. Okay, now you're lighted up. Okay, thank you.
Real quick, can you tell us a little bit about the grants that they have for this? Like, is it a one-time thing, like it would cover 1 year? Or is this something that you guys are applying that it would cover multiple, or like the whole sum of that?
Currently, how the grant cycle works for the DNR for these types of stormwater projects is that they have planning grants every other year and then construction grants every other year. So they have a certain pot of money and you're competing against that pot of money. It's hard to know exactly what you're going to get and what you don't get. We were successful in the planning grant a few years back, and that's why we have the new stormwater master plan, which was a $100,000 project, which was a 50-50 split. And then we talked recently, probably about 6 months ago, about possibly looking at a stormwater utility again, and that didn't pass. So that we're 2 or 3 years out before anything like that would ever be looked at again. But the planning grants are biannual every other year, and so our goal is to apply for it, what we can to help fund these projects.
Awesome. Thank you.
Anybody else? If not, next up is technology.
Good evening. So the technology items start on page 158, 159 for Adobe if you want to follow along. So we have a total of 8 requests in the CIP. First request is the backup upgrades or replacement. So currently we have Unitrans is our current backup solution. This is by default, if we were to upgrade to the next Unitrans box, that's what the cost would be. But certainly we are not going to just pick the default option. We are going to look at different options when the time comes, certainly there are a couple of options that we are looking at now. One is to maybe get a smaller Unitrans box to, complement the increased backup space that we need. And third option is to look at a software-based solution instead of keep using the Unitrans-based solutions, which I will mention a couple requests later about the storage that we will be requesting. So any question with that request? So the second request is the network penetration test. So we have this in the CIP for 2023. It was in the budget for 2023 until the very end that it get removed. So we are requesting that, for 2024 that we put the network pen test back in. It is recommended that some security would say you should do that every year, but we felt that every other year would be sufficient. So as you can see, it's 2024 and then 26 and 28.
I have a question about that. Is there any purchase of hardware or software that comes with that is necessary for that network penetration test? Or is this strictly, are we just paying for a service here? Is that what it is?
Yes, strictly a service for a company that do the ethical hacking to try and determine, they will scan and then they do some ad hoc hacking to see how they can get in. Sometimes it's through phishing and other means.
My problem with that seems more like an operational expense than a CIP project. And I'd rather see this in your operating budget as opposed to the CIP. Okay. Yes, I know you changed it. I understand that.
That's a really good question. Those of you who have been around for a while know that we used to fund more of the CIP through tax levy, and that's appropriate. And most everything that Ing does in technology, that would be our desire to see it funded through tax levy rather than borrow. We've kind of bent the way we look at CIP to be, it used to be just the larger capital items, streets and so forth. Now it's anything that's more than $10,000 with a useful life of more than 5 years. So the items that he's talking about so far, and most of everything he's going to cover tonight, is being funded through tax levy, but it's still in that major category of $10,000 or more, so we include it in the CIP. But we're not borrowing for this. I think that's the important distinction that we want known.
A long-term debt, you're talking about $240,000. Which one?
That would be the same data storage for videos.
There's that one item.
Oh, well, okay, the one item, okay. But
I'll let Ing describe that, but that's predicated on the fact that will be a longer-term solution, and therefore we believe it fits the category that we can borrow for. We're not thrilled about borrowing for anything in technology, but we think that that's defensible given what we're getting in the item he's going to describe at that point.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the next project is the SharePoint upgrades. Currently, we are running the SharePoint 2016 versions. So Microsoft software typically has a maximum of 10 years. So we assume that by 2026, we'll need to do an upgrade. However, I guess it's just across the board on all the projects that we have. What I presented here tonight is what I call the default options. The actual implementation, the actual version that we will do may vary because When we did the 2016 SharePoint upgrade, at the time, we actually bought the 2019 version of SharePoint, and we are going to investigate to see if we can use that in conjunction with the server 2022 licenses that we just got this year. And then if we can, we'll make that jump so that you will see SharePoint next CIP that it can move down for, a few more years down the road. So all I'm saying is, without there's a lot of variables in IT, things change constantly. So I'm putting in what I see as the default option, but then we are going to see what's best fit in our situation at the moment in time. So, all right. Next question is the SAN data storage for videos. As some of you might remember, a couple of years back, we have just been informed at the time that our SAN storage will reach end of life in support, and they give us 2 more years extension. So at the time, we decided that we break out our SAN into 2 use cases. One is the high performance, which we have since, upgraded that to pure storage for the high performance storage. So there's another piece that, because we have 2 more years live on it, so these 2 years, unfortunately, is coming up next year. So when this is up, what we have been looking at is potentially Pure come out with a high capacity storage option. To throw out the technology term here is the QLC quad level cell, for those that wanted to look that up, SSD. So SSD, for most of you that use laptops, smartphone, your storage is SSD. There's no moving parts. A lot of you may have an older laptop that use hard drive. So we are looking at SSD being the better medium because it's no moving parts and it can move file much faster. So the option that I presented here again is probably the more expensive options. Since submitting this, we have been working with 2 other vendors and resellers and looking at Dell with a couple of options from Dell, HPE, NetApps in the background. So hopefully by the time we do budget 2024, what I actually put into budget 2024 would be slightly lower than what is presented here tonight. So 240 was a budgetary code that was given at the time. By the time I plug the actual number in, it might be closer to 200,000 or something like that. So again, actual number may vary. So that's why I'm warning that, because IT stuff changes constantly, and hopefully, other than the last 2 years, most of the time, technology tends to be that you budget for something, by the time you buy it, the price would drop a little bit, except for the last 2 years, because during the supply chain issue, the price actually went up. So something that used to cost $1,500, it ended up being $2,000, or something like that. So any question with that video storage? I forgot to mention one other things. So if I were to go with the third option in my backup solution, which means that it's a software-based backup, I would be able to utilize the storage that we buy here as the backup medium. So I'm tying the 2 projects together. If I am able to do that, then the backup CIP items, the cost for that would be much lower than what I requested. So, but again, I don't want to put in the lower number and then not able to deliver. I kind of err on the safe side that I'm going to present you with the higher number, the default option, but by the time I get to it and the year that we implement this, hopefully we can deliver you a much more cost-effective and better option for us as well. Next CIP is the rugged mobile computers for the PD vehicles. So back in 2019 and 2020, we purchased a total of 10 G-Tech laptops for the police squad car, and we buy them with the 5 years accidental damage protections, so-called ADP. And because of the vibration in the vehicles and so on, we don't intend to run the computer beyond the 5 years, support that we have. So this is to replace all 10 of them in 2025. So, if you look at that number, 50,000 seems high, but again, these are ruggedized mobile computers. it can withstand vibration, much wide ranging, temperature change and so on. Plus the ADP is more costly. And trust me, we do use them. Screen do cracks or keyboard do run, after so many times, the characters start to not show up or whatever. So we do need that. Next item is the replace obsolete networking equipments. Back in 2018 timeframe when we did the City Hall move, we also replaced a good number of Cisco networking equipments. Unfortunately, based on the end of support dates that Cisco show on their website, a good number of them are coming due in 2027. So again, this is based on if we were to replace them today, this is what the price would be. But we all know by the time 2027 comes around, that would not be the model or the equipment that we buy. So it's kind of a tricky business with IT, trying to estimate things out 3 or 5 years from today, because the exact model that we would be choosing is not even out there. So this is best guess estimate. Actual price could be higher or lower. So the next item is the call managers. Same thing. It seems like we just upgraded that 2 years ago, give or take. But there's only 7 or 8 years of life on those server. So our phone system is basically a pair of servers, and we have a pair because of redundancy reasons. So if one were to crash or go down for any reason, the other one would pick up. So this pair of call manager would reach end of service in 2028. So I put that in the CIP, planning out 5 years for that. So the last item is the EBS. We started the EBS project in 2020. At the time, we estimated this much that we need, and it was decided at the time that they will give us the funding over multiple years. So this is the last funding that we would get for the EBS projects. So whatever we did not spend, we carry forward to the following year so that we have a pot of money to deal with any unforeseen or any module that people still want to implement at this point in time. I would say that for the most part, the major modules have been implemented. Certainly, we are still implementing the citizen self-service. In fact, we have training scheduled for next week to do that so that we can conduct more transactions online. Plus, since we implemented the software in 2020, we installed the 2019 version of the software. And guess what? By now, we are up for an upgrade. So the funding that we are requesting is to cover things like that. So to upgrade the software, we will need some consulting hours with the vendor to install the upgrade software and so on. Yeah. So that's all the IT projects. Do you have any question with any of the projects?
Ms. Tompkins.
Thank you. I'm just curious, the rugged mobile computers for PD vehicles, why is that in your budget and not the police budget?
I think that's something that the council decided for as long as I can remember, that majority of the technology needs of the city, they wanted them to channel through the IT budget so that IT has a chance to make sure that it will be something that compatible with the city networks. And also, when something is owned by the IT, we can turn around and reuse the computers for other purposes more easily. Because if it's owned by finance or engineering, they're going to, hang on to their computers rather than just let IT take the machine back when they are done with the old machine and then reuse that somewhere else. So as an example would be that if you ever go to the break room here or the employees' entrance, those were the prior recognized computer that was in the PD vehicle. So when they were done with them, we did not just throw them out because they still run and they still fairly decent. So we use that for people to clock in and out and check their time or what have you. So at least that was the idea that way back, for as long as I have been with the city, the intent was to channel most of the technology through the IT budgets, except for certain departments that have their own revenue, like wastewater. I think library also have their own separate technology, budgets.
So just as the street department rents out their vehicles and then gets a fund to replace their vehicles, do you ever rent out your computers and then have a fund to replace your computers?
No, I think it has been discussed years ago. It's just that the chargeback models will be somewhat complicated, and also it takes manpower to track, and so on. Again, I'm not against the idea. I just think that still, by doing that, you do increase the, there's always, the whole IT. I know some city and counties have done the chargeback model where every hour that IT work, if I spend an hour working for finance, I'm going to charge finance back that hour and so on. But then it takes IT time to track, every day, okay, how much time I spend, with finance versus admin versus this and that. So those are the balancing act. So,
Mr. Werman.
Thank you. I have several questions, and I apologize because I'll hit you with a barrage of them here. But number one, the Unitrends backup is, I see 2025 is the first number we have in there. Is there an expected time that will run out of that 70 terabytes of storage? Is that 2025 or?
That's an estimated time. In the past, our upgrade was not as big of a jump, except this last one. So the last upgrade to this current model that we have essentially increased the size by 2 times the size. So there's a chance that when we get to 2025, that we could potentially run the same box for another year, potentially, or we could start using a different technology like the one that I'm looking at, vMwater solution, a software base.
Sure.
And so if we were to close to run out, we can start some backup into this new system so that we can keep the old and run the new stuff and then eventually cut over to the new. So again, there are a lot of things being considered in the background. We try to find one that is the most cost effective. And another thing that I guess I didn't mention that. So technically in the background is this, our challenge is the current Unitrends backup is a hard drive medium under the cover. So the drawback with that is when we do the full backup of our F drive, which is 8 terabytes to 10 terabytes in size, that takes 2 to 3 days to complete because there was a request to restore something at one point, and then when we did need to do a full restore of that backup archive, it took us a few days to accomplish that. So we do recognize the drawback of the Unitrends solutions, and that's part of the reason that we are looking at, pure storage or even NetApp. They have the SSD base backup medium under the cover, and SSD can run many times faster than hard drive. So the thing that we have to take into consideration would be that if we don't upgrade to a backup medium that is faster, if we ever need to restore or recover from a disaster, you could be looking for days. Even if you have a smooth recovery, that will still take you days just to recover. And if you have an error in your backup and then you have to redo that again, that will be another few days just to rerun that again. So that's part of the reason why when we look at this, we want to look at the complete pictures of this. And that's some of the reason why they channel technology through the IT department. That gives us a chance to look at the overall picture of the IT, landscape, and then try to decide on things that is best serve the city needs. So.
I'm glad you added that. I think that's crucial info here for looking at potential upgrades or different services.
Yeah.
For SharePoint, is that currently a subscription service that we have through SharePoint, or are you purchasing like the actual license for it?
We buy the actual license. We are still one of the last holdout on being on-prem. I know a lot of software are going up on the cloud and all, subscription-based. So we try to stay the on-prem or the buying the license outright for as long as we can. The last few times I looked, even most recently, the last year or two, when we were comparing Office 2019 versus Office 365, the price for a subscription or a cloud-based typically run about three times more than the perpetual license that we have been buying. So plus we hate to mention here, we do what we call the poor man's solutions. We buy one version, let's say 2019, and then we try to milk the same version out for the 9 to 10 years out, or for as long as Microsoft will let us, because they start to end of life of some software sooner than the 10 years. Like Exchange, we just learned that you only get about 5 years out of it now instead of 10. So.
Sure. And that was going to be a follow-up question to that, is I know you just mentioned before about possibly using the 2019 version. I wasn't sure if you did any kind of cost analysis on what it would cost for the previous version and this upgraded version versus doing subscription service. Because I know you mentioned it's a lot more expensive, but I was thinking, I know you get the newer platforms as you do subscription, so it might be cheaper in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, we did the comparison. For now, it's still more costly to go with the subscription or the Office 365 versions. But at some point, if Microsoft no longer sell the perpetual license, we may be forced to do that subscription anyway. So
okay, and I just got two more. Sorry. I saw a lot in here too about the safety, and I think we talked about that when I first met you, and you walked me through the IT department. Are there any kind of like insurance perks or grants or anything that we can get for being more safe and more proactive about our internet and computer safety?
I was hoping that's true. We did pass along one of the conversations we have with one of the consulting company. They thought that with Arctic Wolf that we have, some customers have seen up to 30% discount with the cyber insurance. So we did pass it along to finance. They check it out. Unfortunately, it turns out that they could not offer us any further discount. Yeah.
All right. And then lastly, for the rugged computers, I think I understood that you replace all of them at one time because eventually the warranty runs out. Has there been any thought put into a rotation instead of having to do all of them at one time, or possibly keeping a stock? Basically, like, do you have a record of how many incidents there have been to the rugged computers that would justify why we would want to replace them as soon as the warranty's up, or would we be better off keeping a stock at some point and replacing them as needed?
Yeah, so the old computer that we free up from replacing, we usually hang on to them, and then they could get used in case of the current one get shipping. The nice thing about having the ADP is anything breaks, no question asked, they will replace. And I do have to look back, I know over the years, we did ship back with screen crack, keyboard that no longer, work right on a certain key. After you hit Q key so many times or something like that. But again, can we do a rotation? Certainly, we could look into doing that. We do that now with the Fire because they happen to need a couple new laptop at a time when they get started. So we were able to put them into a tough book every year for them. Now for PD though, however, we have to keep that in mind. The reason that we did back-to-back deployment of that way back when in 2019 and 2020 is they do share their vehicles. So one day an officer could be on squad 92 and the next could be 96. So if you put in different generation or different looking computers, it could get a little bit, challenging. Oh, this one worked differently than the next. So the part of the reason that we decided that for PD, we want to do the whole batch together is it make it easier for us to maintain. When we install software, we know it's the same version across the board, and it works the same way for all their officers as well. So that's part of the reason why PD is that way, but Fire is different. So
that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, how many years did that enterprise software program run? Do you remember?
The last one, you mean? So the last one lasted about, if I'm not mistaken, about 12 years. And then we started look at replacing at that point in time. And then it took us another.
That was a perpetual line item. I remember that. Mr. Stauber, you have the floor, sir.
I do. Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation, Eng. Wondering about the expenditure for $240,000 for storage for videos. I would like to know, what are we required to store? For how long, for example, or for how much data? And what that $240,000 buys in those terms.
Sure. So I use the term videos, but it's not technically just video. It's just that majority that gets stored on that high capacity SAN is video. So we have a total of 40 to 50 surveillance cameras throughout the city. So there's a city hall, PD, fire, parks and rec maintenance, aquatic center, streets, and so on that have those IP cameras. They all stream the video back to our servers here, and then they have to go someplace. And those videos currently store at 128 days of retention. So that's a good chunk of video, just that alone. And then we have some WatchGuard video that PD saved from their prior body cam system that we are retaining. Wastewater have their manholes videos that they store also on that, video storage. Certainly larger file, like if they do a flyover for taking the GIS, the map for the city and so on, those could get stored on that same drive. And then currently, even communication, they store some of their videos on the storage that, that we have as well. So that's the beauty of this IT-based budgeting, meaning that we have to plan ahead. We have to kind of estimate how much PD, fire, and so on we'll need, and then we make sure that we stay ahead of the curve. So when we reach 80 to 90% utilization, we better have a plan in place for the upgrade. So that's kind of in a nutshell, or except in this case, Dell decided to pull components from their product line, so we have to force to upgrade.
So a follow-up then. So what are the legal requirements for video storage? And how are we currently meeting that requirement? What options do we have for storage?
Sure.
That might be more cost effective.
Yep. So I believe in general, surveillance cameras, typically maybe 30 days, maybe PD might have a better idea, what's their, I'm not sure about the legal requirements, but we have been told that you want to go with at least 30 days. Because we have the storage in-house, we decided to go 128 days. Part of the reason is, I think for body cam and other cameras, at one point we were told 121 days is the retention policy that we need to comply to. So we did 128 days, just give us one extra week beyond the 121 days. But certainly, that's just a general guideline that we follow. Can we have done less? Certainly, yes. It's just that when you do less and then you need a video that is 36 days old, you can't pinch at yourself. You just don't have that video. So that's the challenge we have.
So from what you're saying, it sounds like the requirements for storage are self-imposed. Maybe police department aside, and if they have an opinion, maybe they could express it now. So it leads me then to the cost, $240,000. If we are arbitrarily, desiring to store for a certain period of time, do we have options for wastewater or stormwater to store their data themselves so that maybe it's a more cost-effective approach? And I don't know what those vehicles would be, I'm thinking TVs, thumb drives, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just putting it out there is what are the options? Because $240,000 to store the wide variety of videos that you just listed. Some may be required, some may be just a nice to have. For example, if we were only to spend $100,000, does that cover police, the minimum requirement for police? I'm just trying to break down that $240,000, itemize a little bit, sorting the need from the want.
All right. I mean, I do want to clarify, the WatchGuard are the older body cam the body cams that they have today is stored on an evidence.com cloud, so it's not even on our system.
Yeah, actually, I was just going to explain that the stuff that we have currently is through a contract with Axon or Taser. They store all of our body camera on a cloud, and we pay for that service separate from this. The stuff that we have stored is from WatchGuard, which is a previous platform that we used. And the limits kind of vary with the types of crimes we have recorded on those. So some evidence we have to keep throughout the entire duration that somebody is serving their prison sentence, because they could dispute that arrest at any time, and we'd have to represent that. So that causes us to have some issues that way.
And I also want to zoom in on that 240,000, as I was mentioning earlier. That's just a default options. And ever since we submitted that, we have been working with 2 other vendors to look at other options, from HPE to NetApp and so on. And the more realistic number by the time we plug into budget 2024 is closer to 200,000 more or less, first of all. And then second of all would be that you are looking at a dual system in the background. We actually get a pair of SAN storage. It's not just one. Part of the reason is this video storage, a portion of that we intended to, if we buy that big of a capacity, which is 150 terabytes, more or less usable, a portion of that, about 30 to 40 terabytes, could be used for backup reasons. That's one thing. And then the other thing is, of all the videos that we store, we could not back them up to Unitrans. And that's the reason that we use what we call replication technology to have another copy of that video's storage at a different location. So the nice thing is the city has a pretty robust fiber networks interconnecting, various buildings that we have. So we can place the city hall on one device and then replicate that to fire or technically another location. Any one other location that has fiber, we could have done that too. So could you have done CD and DVD and so on? Sure, but we have been through that. Just burning, PD probably could attest to that. If you ever talk to Lori Krugstrom, they used to supply the request from the district attorney or whatever for evidence. They have to burn those videos that they need onto DVDs. That takes them a lot of times to burn them onto DVD. So because DVD is one of the slowest medium that you can get. So hard drive is faster, but still not one of the fastest that you can find in this day and age. SSD is probably the next wave of backup medium. So plus practicality, because imagine one DVD can hold maybe 3.2 gigabytes, and you're looking at 150 terabytes. That's like, few thousand. I guess I cannot multiply in my head, but I can imagine you're looking at thousands of DVDs, and then in the process of copying and whatnot, you drop one, and then here goes your whole batch. So,
Mr. Stauber, did you have more?
I do, and I don't mean to belabor the point, but I look at it again as, and you listed a wide range of current, requirements for storage of data, video. And the police department is on one extreme, very important. You probably want to keep that for a long time, easy access for a variety of reasons, but maybe some others are not as high a priority. And I'm just trying to get my head around the $240,000 expenditure as on a priority level. Is it critical that we spend the $240,000 to store all that video? Or do we have options to, put the police department requirements in one bucket? And it sounds like they've already got their own storage for many, many items. But it just seems like based on what you said, it seems like we're storing a lot of data, and I'll use the term maybe unnecessarily, right? And I don't know if it'd be asking too much, but if it's possible, I would like to have a more itemized breakdown of what we're storing and a priority to those elements that are being stored, that data that's being stored, so that'll help me understand why it's $240,000.
Okay, certainly, yeah, I can make a breakdown of what we currently store on that high capacity sand that we currently have, which, is being end of line of support from down. So, okay.
In layman's terms, if I know where something is, and I'm not in a hurry to get it, I can take my time and find it. Some things are more important. I want to have them right away, and those we'd want to store for quick access. And you give a good example. That was for court records. But some things that maybe are just archival data that won't be accessed maybe every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, or maybe never. But it seems like we're spending money to store things that aren't a requirement, maybe just a nice to have, or because we used to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, we have manholes, videos, among other things that I assume, they need to keep those videos as well. I mean, if, certainly, within reason, you can reduce your capacity by maybe 10, 15%, but still, bringing a 120 terabyte instead of 150 terabyte size sand is simply going to cost in the ballpark. Can you buy a less expensive system? Sure, we can find a $30,000 or $50,000 sand that do the same thing. It's just that those will be hard drive based. It may not have replication built in and all the other things. I understand. So if the instruction to me is to buy the cheapest that we can find, within reason, I do have that. I did look into that as well. I'm just not comfortable providing that solution that in the long run may not serve our needs. In the time of needs that we need to restore from our backup, and the time taken is going to be days instead of hours. That's going to be...
Sure. The request is not that you buy the cheapest. The request is that we take a second look at what we're storing and why we're storing it. If we have video cameras at the Vanderhay Waters, that's a nice to have, and I'm sure it offers some security. How long do we need to store that information? That's the kind of question I'm looking at.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, it's, I think you'll be responding directly to Mr. Stauber, I take it?
Sure, or I can copy everyone in.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. And last, certainly not least, is wastewater. It's funny because that's the last thing you see of the water that goes down the drain, right?
Good evening. For 2024 and 2025, Wastewater Treatment Division has a plant upgrade currently in the engineering design phase. Final design is expected to be complete by the end of 2023. The project would then need approval from the Wisconsin DNR and Common Council before it can proceed. If approved, this project would be ready to go for bid in early 2024. Construction is expected to begin in 2024 with completion in 25. There are 3 individual CIP items included in this project. Cost of these are estimated to be split between both years equally. The first item is phosphorus removal improvements. This will improve control of air and mixing in the treatment process, important for maintaining biological phosphorus removal. Cost estimate is $960,000, again divided between the 2 years, and would be funded by savings from wastewater's 601 account. The second CIP item with this project is installation of a phosphorus disc filter. This will add a filtration process to our effluent, which is required to meet the phosphorus compliance deadline of September 30th, 2025. The estimated cost is split between the 2 years at $10,890,000 and would be paid for through a Clean Water Fund low interest loan through the Wisconsin DNR. Application will take place in late summer, and DNR lets everybody know what allocations will be by the end of the year. This loan could be eligible for up to $3 million in loan forgiveness, but again, we won't know for sure until the year's end. The loan term would be 20 years, which is standard. The third item is addition of a biosolids thickener. This will add a second biosolids thickener to provide critical redundancy that we currently lack. Estimated cost is $2,260,000 total and would be funded by savings from wastewater's 601 account. A yearly wastewater rate study will be presented to the council in fall. This will provide a detailed financial outlook on funding for this project before seeking council approval to proceed. Another CIP project we hope to fit in 2024 and 2025 is updating our Northeast lift station. This project would replace the two remaining original 1976 vintage pumps with modern dry pit submersible pumps. We had the first two pumps replaced in 2015, but at the time we didn't want to commit to all four being replaced at once. The first two replacements have proven themselves trouble-free for the past 8 years, and now it's time to replace the other two. There are some wet well improvements also needed, such as replacement of badly rusted staircase and flow gates. Engineering design would be done in 24 with improvements hopefully completed in 25. Cost estimate is $1,554,000 and would be funded by savings from wastewater 601 account. In 2026 and 2027, we have an upgrade of electrical controls and the backup generator at our Lincoln lift station. This would replace obsolete 1979 motor controls and the backup generator. Cost estimate is $500,000 and would be paid for by wastewater utility user fees. This Lincoln lift update would complete our efforts to replace or rehabilitate all four wastewater lift stations that were originally built in the 1970s. Final CIP item 601-7411, vehicles and equipment. We anticipate and recommend the following replacement schedule over the next 5 years in order to maintain a reliable, cost-effective fleet for wastewater. In 2024, we have replacement of a 10-year-old sewer inspection trailer and van combination with one cargo box truck. The box would include a build-out specifically for use with sewer inspection equipment. Some of our existing inspection equipment still has some life left, so we would reuse these and have them installed in this new truck. Only necessary inspection components would be replaced with new ones. Total cost estimate is $185,000. In 2025, replacement of our main utility sewer service truck, which will be 10 years old at the time. Cost estimate $85,000. In 2026, purchase a much needed forklift for safe loading and unloading of treatment supplies, something we've never had. We've always had to borrow street divisions and go get that anytime we get a load in a wastewater plant. Fortunately, we've had that option, but it's becoming more and more frequent and kind of a hassle for everyone. Also in 2026, we have a replacement of a 25-year-old ATV and plow used for cleaning sludge and grit from the bottom of tanks. It's the easiest way we've found to do it. Cost estimate is $15,000. In 27, we have a replacement of M118 pickup truck, which will be 10 years old, estimate $50,000. In 2028, we anticipate replacement of M126 pickup truck. That'll be 11 years old, estimate about $45,000. Also in 28, replacement of wastewater division's car, which will be 12 years old, estimate $35,000. All vehicles and equipment would be funded by wastewater utility user fees. That covers wastewater. Are there any questions?
Okay, no questions. I don't see anybody. Most of what you're doing is funded out of your reserve fund. Well, I call it a reserve fund, but it's just you call it a wastewater savings fund.
Some of it, yes.
Okay, and then a lot of it will be covered over long-term payments from the utility itself, in front of the
Yes,
fees.
and assisted by a low interest loan through Clean Water Fund offered by the Wisconsin DNR for projects like this.
You don't have to go through Public Service Commission for that rate setting.
No, we're not under that authority.
Good. Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, discussions, concerns, and suggested changes to the council to the proposed CIP. Questions? Answers? I have one that was troubling me over the weekend, and I think I'll tell you what. I'll yield the floor to Ms. Tompkins first, and then I'll talk.
Okay, thank you. Another big picture question. This would probably be for Steve or Jennifer. So when we hear that the roof is leaking in the street department, but they also need to do an electrical upgrade, both which seem pretty like right now things, do we ever say to other departments, hey, this is really important, and so do we shift the CIP through departments, or does each department get a percentage and everyone works within their percentage?
Great question. The CIP is really just project-based. So it's not an idea that, the technology department gets so much and the street department gets so much. Truthfully, it's based on priorities. If it turns out that we need to move up or back a project for some reason, we do it based upon purely the priorities involved. So for example, if we think that the street's roof is going to make it till 2027, I'm making this up, and it becomes apparent that it needs to be fixed in 2025, it needs to be re-roofed, we're just going to do what it takes to shift. We will talk to the people involved, but we'll say, hey, look, this project of yours appears to be a lesser priority. We're going to move that out. We need to move that out to make room for the street repair. It's not like those departments are going to say, hey, wait a minute, what happened to us? We're now getting cut back in our share. It's really truly based on the individual value of each and every item on the list. That may sound idealistic, but it's true.
So, Mr. Hawley, do you feel like both of those items should be done this year?
Yeah, ideally for 2024, we'd like to do the electrical service upgrade also. Like I said, I have a firmer quote coming from Merkel Electric to kind of narrow that down. Whether we have to shift something like our east side roof is basically covering up all of our parking or we park our vehicles. If you remember the tour I gave you on the east side, if we have to switch those two around, we can do something like that.
And if you if you can't switch those around, would that be something that you would then go to Steve and say, these are both needed, we have to, some other department's going to have to wait?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I apparently like to talk. No, anything that involves the protection of our assets. And I know we've talked about before, well, what if the street department is going to move in the next few years? Do we really want to do a roof and then we leave? Or do we electrical and then we move to some other site? I think at this point, as much as we want to see the street division move to another location, we have to act at this point as if that's not going to happen anytime real soon. So anything that involves maintaining those facilities in a quality fashion, safety, all those types of things, we want to make sure that those are put front and center. And if Chris comes to me or his successor someday, we're going to move things around as we need to.
Okay, and then a question for Mr. Turchi in the same kind of realm. So you had a mill in place project that you wanted done, but then we have an airport building that needs to be demolished. And again, it seems like both need to get done. So, if we have roads that need to be fixed, if we just keep pushing them off and off, that's not ideal either. So would you also feel comfortable saying, hey, both of these are a priority and some other department is going to need to wait?
When we look at our asphalt mill in place program and overlay program, we are also making adjustments to that program every year based upon needs or if conditions of a specific street change. I like to look at it when we're working together as a CIP committee, we're working together as a team. We're each trying to jostle our projects around. We each know what our importance are. And then if there's something that's a higher priority, can we move something from somebody else's department? And we're talking about these things behind the scenes. We're basically all trying to work together. Yes, you saw some movement in the mill in place program. Yeah, we maybe moved it back, but that was to help get something that may have been a little bit higher priority in another department to get their needs met. So it is a balancing act when we do this. And yes, I do think we have some needs for the city, but we're also here as a team and to try to make things work for everybody.
You still have the floor? No. Did somebody else flash up there? Okay. One thing I noticed when I was going over this stuff over the weekend was there seems to have been, for years and years and years, every time we've done this program, we've done a couple of things. Number one is we tried to reserve room for long-term, what we called legacy projects. Basically, the library was one of those places. I remember we waited, I think, 7 years before we finally went ahead with the library project. The fire station, the new fire station happened a lot quicker than that. It was more unexpected, but we were told that we had a hole in it, that we found a place to work it. And as a matter of fact, we set I think Mr. Spiros, not Mrs. Spiros, but Mr. Spiros was the one who insisted on a $5 million limit to the borrowing on that. And he fought for it and he won it. We've always had a limit, and we've always said like $3.5 million. Now, I know we had Eilers come here and do the 5-year financing plan, and I guess there's some things here that are sort of out of whack. I think in the CIP itself, it talks that we're spending over $4 million or incurring $4 million or more in debt every year of the 5-year period. And yet the Eilers report, and especially when he talked about the sizing of the issues, very rarely did they exceed 3.5 million. So why is that? Okay.
That plan was based on a previous 5-year cycle. So, and I made a note of that as well to send the 24 to 28 plan to Eilers and have them forecast that out so that you can see that. However, I just noticed that as well this evening, so I will send that off tomorrow and let you know what that looks like. But that was based on an earlier 5-year cycle.
Okay. The thing for me is that I'm seeing that we're not one of the years of this proposed CIP is below $4 million in additional indebtedness. And can we really afford that? I think Eilers was telling us we couldn't, at least if I'm understanding it correctly.
I'll start, and Jennifer may want to add to this. We're not necessarily fully comfortable with that dollar amount ourselves. And I think we know that when we go through those years, year by year, we may well need to trim back somewhat to make this work. And we'll get some new numbers run by Eilers and see what they can justify looking at today's numbers. But just because we talk about that number doesn't mean you're going to see that amount borrowed in any given year for these projects. I do want to talk about the legacy thing for a minute, because I've been here 12 years, and I know I inherited the whole thing where the fire station was done when I got here. But with the idea of once every 5 years, could we do a legacy project? And the two that really stood out were the library and community center, and then the aquatic center. both of those we were blessed in the fact that those obviously are the types of projects that you can get private fundraising for. People want a beautiful library, they're willing to donate. People want a really nice aquatic center, they're willing to put money in. You do things like a police station or a public works garage, those are not fundraiser types of events. So we've talked to Dave Ferris of Ellers about how we can fit in a legacy project like a street building into this project list. It's very, very difficult. I mean, some of you have been around for a little while, seen the early estimates of what it would take to go in with the county on that property down on the south end. It's not cheap. It's not like the library was, we raised 3 million, or people raised 3 million, we give you 3 million, hooray. We're talking about a much bigger number. So, we're very blessed that the Buffalo building is being donated to us. That gives us a real opportunity to make that project work. But I think even the police station would take a while to get accomplished otherwise. Looking at the other big projects, whether it's the street building or something else that gets into those maybe teens of millions, they're just not going to fit very well in a 5-year plan.
I know what happened with the library, and it was rather ingenious, I think, is that it was carried over by, there was a what they call the Blue Sky account. I think he remembers that. And basically that was it was always put in the 5th year of the plan, so that we could always move it, kick it on down the line more. But it was always in the back of the mind that there was going to be a new library eventually, and we had to figure out how to get to it. And the finance director / city administrator at that time with the library had a solid rule on that, and that solid rule was that we should never we should never make an expenditure more than what we paid off the year before. And we pay off a certain amount of principal and interest every year. And so we could only replace principal and interest that would equal that. And so that kept our borrowing down and kept it at a limit that allowed us to have room for that special legacy project when we needed it. I think there are a lot of projects around town that people would like to have us do. We just simply can't do it all at one time. But I think we need to find a way of find a technique or a policy that will allow us to save for those projects that we need so badly, and yet still deliver a reasonable level of service to the people of Marshfield.
I'll go one step farther than you said. I think ideally you'd be wanting to borrow no more money than you pay off in principal. I mean, when you start talking about interest, I mean, you really don't want to borrow more than you're paying. You want to be holding it down so you're making progress. And we've tried really hard over the years to do that. And we may have to refine this more in order to achieve that. And this is a very generous community. I mean, beyond the library and community center and the aquatic center, the people in the city have raised a lot of money privately for things like zoo improvements and any number of things that have allowed us. And I really think private-public partnerships are going to be the way that these projects get done in the past. If they're not private money, they won't happen. The problem is when you start talking about buildings like police stations, fire stations, public works buildings, the public appetite to get out there and beat the drum trying to raise money is very different than a library or a community center or a pool. It's just not as appealing a fundraiser type of event. But we need to do that. Quite honestly, if you look at this, you look at $4 million some of these years and you say, gosh, can't we cut that? The lion's share of it, I think we realize, is what we've been criticized for in the past, at least the whole 12 years I've been here, is not doing enough street work. Truthfully, you look at $2.1 to $2.5 million per year in mill and overlay, that's half of it, if not more than half of it. And that's not including reconstructions and other types of road maintenance work. So on a typical year, 75% or more of what we have in this capital plan is for what people have demanded the loudest, at least in the time I've been here, which makes it very difficult to trim. I'm not trying to give excuses, but that's where the challenge is.
I know. I think my argument may not be as much with the amount as it is with the priorities and where our priorities should be. And I think by the time we bring this to the floor of the next council meeting, we should have a good debate about that too. Ms. Tompkins, you wanted to be recognized?
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is that first, when do we sell these bonds? Do we sell bonds for the 2024 CIP? When would we sell?
That will occur in 2024. We are currently underway to sell our bonds on June 8th or 13th for the 2023 CIP projects.
So I think maybe it would be helpful when you present the bonds to say, hey, we're selling this many bonds, and this is what Ehlers says is sort of, we're meeting what they're asking us of only, borrowing this much money. It might, just to kind of bring the two together might be helpful.
Sure. So when those bonds are sold, they're structured. Dave will look at our principal and interest payments for all the years out. I think we're probably out to 2042 now on our longest borrowing. And he will sell those bonds in accordance of where there's room in each year's payment to place them. So we have, if you look at 2023, we might be at 5 million. If you're looking at 2024, we might be at 4.5 million, and it gets gradually less as the years go out. And so when we sell a new issue each year, he plugs those in to achieve either a certain tax rate base that goes towards debt or a dollar amount. So right now, we've kind of looking at changing our philosophy and saying we don't want to levy any more than $5 million for principal and interest payments each year. So he'll plug those bond payments so that we don't go over that amount wherever there's room, looking out 21 years.
There's one question I've got for you on the Ehlers plan. When they're talking about our 2023 money now, the stuff that we're in the process of borrowing now. And they've got a total of $7,350,000, but 300 and some odd, $3,575,000 are for TIF number 13 projects. I didn't know that we were actually going forward.
So again, that is on the previous 5-year CIP, that plan that you're looking at. And last year we had anticipated going through with that project. So that's why you're
So when we get to the final meeting on this, if it goes to the next meeting on this, we're going to be looking at something that's substantially different than this.
No, I'm going to ask Dave at Ehlers to redo the schedule with the 2024 to 2028 plan so that you can see how that looks.
Are there any further questions?
Can I make one more point? Something this body's brought up before. In fact, Councilmember Tompkins, you've brought it up nicely in the past too, going for grants. You look at some of the bigger items. I know the fire department's looking at a possible grant or any monies they can get to offset the cost of that larger engine that they need to replace, in the 5-year plan. We're looking at grants for any number of things. I've met with somebody recently. I think a couple of you folks here in the room were involved, going to look at doing an RFQ and finding out who else can sign on to us to help us get grants. We're looking for every dollar we can to offset some of these costs, but right now, they are what they are. That vehicle that the fire department is showing is 1.1 million or whatever it is. They need it. They need to replace. But that doesn't mean that the ultimate amount may be that. We may find ways to offset, and we will do everything we humanly can to do that.
If there's no further discussion, item G is to consider a recommendation to send the 2024 to 2028 CIP with any requested changes to the June 27th council meeting for final review and approval. We would do that by a motion in a second. Motion by Ms. Spiro, second by Mr. Varsho. Discussion? Okay, there are going to be some changes coming from IT. We're going to be looking at a new plug-in from Ehlers. Is there anything else? Anything else, any changes you want to see before it goes? Mr. Worman.
I think it was in our first session on this, I believe there was a Parks and Rec line item. That was I think it was 35,000-ish for Wenzel Plaza. I think we ended up determining that was something of a covered salary. That sounds correct. I think we wanted that removed.
That was the program coordinator,
Yes.
right? Is that right, Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my fault at the last meeting, and Justin was here to correct that. That actually is covering the cost of the individual. That portion that is not filled by other entities that are participating in funding her position. And I know that doesn't seem like a typical capital expense to be talking about a portion of someone's salary, but it kind of goes into the programming bucket because that person is the one who's making sure that events and activities and everything that goes on there happens. I do want to ask one more thing if I can, Council President Wagner, because I was whispering to Ing for a second, just so there's no misunderstanding. Was there an actual request of a change of IT in their items?
Who was it that made that comment?
I know Councilmember Stauber had a lot of questions, but I just want to make sure if there's something supposed to be changing that we understand what that is.
No, it was Mr. Stauber who had requested a breakdown of who absolutely has to have storage and how much storage they need and this sort of thing.
So an information request.
That was an information request, yes.
I sent an email to Ing with a copy to you, Steve.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, Mr. Worman, go ahead.
And the other change that I was going to suggest, and I don't know if this is the right way to go about it, but I was going to suggest that we would swap the remaining part of the roof and the electrical from streets with the $240,000 from tech in their years of implementation, so that we could make sure that we're covered in the streets building before anything
I'm not sure the process. We have a motion on the floor. I guess this is an amendment to the motion.
Sure.
To be
Would you like me
specific
to click
about
the
what
amend
the changes you want to see. Would that be correct?
We actually have the amendment button pushed right now, so I'm not sure if there's a different amendment from Mr. Rigel.
I'll also make this an amendment. So I'll motion for that amendment.
Okay, so there's a motion by Rigel to, this was on, which one was this? Go ahead. Mr. Rigel, go ahead.
That was on bringing up the electrical panel for streets.
Oh, okay, yes. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's see, the second was by Worman. A discussion on the amendment. If not, please vote.
I just want to make sure I have it correct before we vote.
Okay, go ahead.
So you were asking for the electrical panel and roof replacement at the street department to be swapped with the $240,000 video request from IT, the sand storage. Is that
right?
What I'm understanding?
That's what Mr. Worman suggested.
What was your motion? What are you actually?
Oh, I just motioned to bring the electrical panel up to 2024.
With staff finding how to fit that.
Correct, yes.
Mr. Worman, do you still support that as a second?
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? And remember, this is an amendment. So all those in favor, please say aye. Oh, excuse me, we got to vote on the machine. Thank you. Hey, not going to let me vote. I don't know. An update. Just press me in, yes.
Mr. Stauber?
Aye.
Any other changes or requests for information? Nobody? Okay, then we'll go back to the to the main motion, and that is to send the 2024 to 2028 CIP with the requested changes to the June 27th council meeting. If there's no further discussion, please vote. Put me down as a yes again.
Aye.
Mr. Fire?
All right, thank you. Okay, according to the agenda, we have completed our tasks for the evening, and we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Tompkins and second by Werman. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? So carried. Thank you, Russ.
Thank you. Have a good evening.